Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Into the Spotlight. I'm Morley.
And I'm Ryan.
And today I am very excited for our guest. He is a maker, woodworker, coder. He's actually kind of a hard guy to put into a box, but I think the best way to sum him up is in his own words, which is, I make things with computer and glue. So please welcome John Kuiphoff.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I think it's pretty much how everybody starts off pretty much every guest of every episode. But thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, yeah. So I've met John since we've all been locked down, which is not something you can say for a lot of relationships. Back at the beginning of April, I started these weekly Zoom hangouts with makers on Zoom having coffee. And John has been there since the very beginning. And I feel like I've gotten his story through little bits and pieces through these large, like 20-person hangouts. But I'm really excited to hear it uninterrupted in your own words.
Awesome.
Yeah. So could you just give us a little bit of background of kind of like where you came from, how you got to what you're doing now, which is all sorts of cool, like woodworking, electronics, and really, really cool videos. How did you... And teaching. I didn't even say you're a teacher as well.
Sure, absolutely. You know, it's been a weird thing. So I teach at a college, right? I teach in this interactive multimedia department over in New Jersey of the United States. And it's a very strange program. A lot of folks come in there wanting to learn how to make video games, right? Everybody wants to learn how to make video games. But when they get there, they actually wind up learning more about coding and digital fabrication and film and interactive writing and podcasting. So it's a new emerging media department. And so I fit in there because of my background. So when I was looking at colleges, I actually only applied to one college, and I was chasing a girl, and it happens that we're married now, so it worked out. But I wasn't planning really on going to, I wasn't college material. It wasn't first and foremost. At that time, I was playing a lot of guitar and I was in a band. So I figured I would go to college and I'd be a music major. However, when I got to the college, shortly before, I learned that, if you're a music major, you don't normally make your own music. You have to play other people's music. So I was like, I'm not doing that. So I figured, I'm going to be a graphic designer. Because at that time, we're going back to like the year 2000, Photoshop was like getting really big, and I was doing a lot with collages. I was like on this yearbook club for my school, and I loved working in Photoshop. So I figured I'd be a graphic designer. So I started doing that, and about halfway through, I discovered programming. The web was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and so I thought it was so interesting that you could incorporate programming into your design to breathe life into it, and that opened up a whole new set of doors. So I graduated college and I became an instructional designer. Not something I planned for, but I really discovered that I love teaching. At that time...
So instructional designer is designing curriculums?
Yes, but with technology. So a faculty member or a teacher would come in and they would say, you know what, I need an application that does this or it does that or teaches this concept. So I would go there in Flash and I would mix like the music, I would put the graphics in there, I would do some kind of video work, I do voiceovers, and I was creating like interactive products and basically making like mini apps before there was like the iPhone and everything, of course. So, but then I started making web apps, and eventually I got tired of what I was doing. So I talked my boss into quitting his job with me, and we both went to the ITP program at NYU. And the reason I went there is when I visited it, you walked out of this elevator, and the first thing that you saw was this mirror that was made out of wood. It was made up of something like over 800 pixels. And when you stood in front of it, each pixel was on the servo motor, and they all turned, and it made this really interesting whooshing noise, and you saw your reflection in it. And to me, it was the closest thing to Hogwarts I'd ever seen in real life. So like, this is what I was doing. Because I was always dabbling in electronics. I was dabbling in art. I was always dabbling in all these things. So we went to NYU, paid full price, and we had a great time. We built a big app that got really popular. We had like this thing called Zoopers. We had like over 100,000 teachers using it. And at that time, that was a lot of people. So I was an app developer after that. I built a ton of software. But then I didn't. So if you ever seen the movie like Forrest Gump, there's a scene where he's running. And at one point he just stops and he's like, I think I'm done now. And that's what happened with web development. I was doing really big clients, really interesting work. And then overnight it just stopped. And so,
like the work stopped, or you didn't feel?
No, I just didn't want to do it in one night. It only took one night. There was nothing leading up to it. It was in one night. I didn't want to do it anymore. I went from loving it to just not loving it anymore. I got really burnt out on it. And so I took the money I got from a job and I bought a bunch of woodworking equipment. And I really haven't looked back since. So I went on YouTube to learn how to use the woodworking equipment, and just to get away, I think, from the computer for a little while. I think I was just burnt out from using a computer, but it didn't take long for me to start incorporating computers back into the woodworking. So if you look into my shop now, there's laser cutters, CNC machines, 3D printers, electronics, and all kinds of like Edelkrone, like computerized, filming systems. So now I found this happy marriage where I can use computer programming and woodworking and digital fabrication and electronics and music and media and all this stuff, and you just kind of like put it all together to create innovative work. And like that's been the dream. So I feel like everything that I've done has finally led up to this moment now. And so now I'm trying to learn how to make videos, which, by the way, and maybe we could talk about this more in the podcast, is harder than I thought. Because the thing is when I learned programming, that took a couple of years. When I learned digital fabrication, that took a couple of years. When I learned like Arduino electronics, that took a couple of years. When I learned how to play guitar and do music theory, that took a couple of years. But for some reason, I thought that video would be instant. Like I would just know how to make awesome films. And that is so far from the truth. And so now I'm just trying to be patient with myself. I'm like, no, let's work on the basics and let's just keep working through it like you've had to work through everything else. And there's a lot of satisfaction, though, in being a beginner again, feeling like you're 12 years old, learning something for the first time. So that's where I'm at today.
Well, I got to tell you, your videos don't look like you're a beginner. I mean, you have some really beautiful shots and angles and storytelling. Like I was watching a bunch today, and they're awesome.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I was binge watching them. I was very impressed with them because I found it funny. Because like even for myself, when I first started getting into videos, I think everyone has like a tough learning curve, especially depending on what type of style that you're going for, whether it's like videos or like mini documentaries or short films or what have you. But I was really impressed with your videos because I've never seen anything quite like your videos in the way that it blends craftsmanship and technology. I always found that really, really interesting how you go between all these different visual styles. Like you're in the wood shop and then next thing you know, we're looking at a computer screen and you're seeing code and you're doing graphic design, but it never feels jarring. It all feels so well thematically tied together. And that's one of the bigger questions that I had for you was whether like, as you make more of these projects, in the workshop, how has that also impacted the way that you make your videos? Do you find that they're growing in parallel in different ways?
A lot of the things that I do, so if I go back into music, I like music because you can break the notes and everything up into the smallest pieces, and then you put them all together and you have a piece of music. When you're doing something like with the graphic design, you're taking the basic shapes and the colors and all the fundamentals, and you're putting them together and you're creating an identity. When you're creating something like with a 3D printer or a laser cutter or a woodworking, you're taking the basics and you're building something big like a table. So film is pretty much the same thing. It's like an essay where you have small little words, you put them together to make sentences, sentences make paragraphs, paragraphs make this, and before you know, you have a body of work. So filming is just another way to compile small things to make a bigger thing that tells a story. So they all feel like the same thing. They don't feel all that differently. So when you're trying to mix them all together, it seems natural, like especially because I'm surrounded by probably one of the weirdest wood shops you've ever seen. It's full of technology, but it's a wood shop and everything's full of sawdust. So
that's funny.
That's cool. Like, I mean, just speaking more about your filmography style, I think I commented on one of your Instagram posts like, oh, I love this angle. It really reminds me of Wes Anderson. And I was so surprised to learn that like you've never heard of Wes Anderson.
No, I looked him up though, and I started watching his stuff. Like, wow, he's really good. Yeah.
Oh, awesome!
That way he uses color, and everything's in symmetry, and I really enjoyed his
all
work.
The pastel colors and everything else.
Absolutely.
Is there any like content creators when you first began that you were kind of looking for inspiration or for ideas, or just anything in that zone, trying to find ideas like how can I make this as visually interesting as possible?
When I first saw David Picciuto from Make Something, I was like, that guy is we have a very similar story. We're both really into Nirvana. We were both web developers. We both started, it's like we have a very similar story. I would love to meet the guy someday. In fact, I have one of his data visualizations that I made him right here.
I love that video for that, by the way. That was so cool.
That was one of my first. I did not know how to make videos. It's funny when you're working on videos. The thing that I'm working right now is learning how to talk in front of a camera. So in that camera angle, or where I'm talking to camera, I feel like I'm like a hostage person. You know what I mean? Like I was like perfectly still, like petrified, and like talking to the camera, directly to the camera. I wasn't like even blinking. But now I'm trying to do like what I saw Morley's a couple of his last videos, and you're like genuinely happy as you're building like your Prusa and your personality shines through. But that actually takes practice.
It's hard.
It is hard.
It's hard. It's not natural, but it gets easier over the video. So I'm just letting the video making just let it let it evolve, and eventually in a year. The personalities will be authentic, and it won't have to be as scripted, and that just takes time. And that's the thing I'm struggling with. Like, yeah, this just takes time, like everything else. Because there's this. I'm probably going to read. I have this quote over there that I always look at. It's by Ira Glass, and it goes. I might not say the whole thing, but I think about this a lot. And he says, "Nobody tells this to people who are beginners. I wish someone told me. All of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste, but there is this gap. For the first couple of years you make stuff, it's just not that good. It's trying to be good, it has potential, but it's not. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And the taste is why your work disappoints you. A lot of people never get past this phase, they quit. Most people I know do interesting creative work went through years of this. We know our work doesn't have the special thing that we want it to have. Geez, I can't read this. Like the text is way too small. I'm over here. We go through this, and basically it goes on saying it just takes time. You got to fight your way through it. You just got to keep producing work and producing work and producing work, and eventually that gap closes, and you finally get to where you want to be. And I saw that when I was learning program. I saw that like even in like digital fabrication, I can make anything that I put my mind to. But the filming, there's still this gap. I know what I want it to look like, but it's just not there. And my good friend Brett reminded me once, I did a video, and he goes, John, it's a really good video, except it's like really good, except with really amateur rookie mistakes. He's like, and there's like, it's weird seeing really awesome cinematography and then really rookie mistakes all on the same thing. And I thought about it while I was like, yeah, he's right. So you just got to like practice and just practice and practice and just know in 6 months time it'll look good. Because I did look back at like David Picciuto's early work, and I'm like, I can do this. Yeah. Just give me some time. Don't worry. I'm going to catch up. So that's,
Oh, I'm sure you will.
A lot of my students need to hear that too, that, they always say, but you already know how do you do all this? I'm like, well, I'm like double your age basically. And so I've had half a lifetime to like work on it. Things just take time.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like, honestly, I can't point out a specific rookie mistake Brett might be talking about, at least in one of your last 4 videos, which all seem like very, very well developed. But I feel like you have such like a unique perspective and background that alone gives you like a very interesting, unique style. And it kind of makes up maybe for a lack of experience in video making, because it's such an interesting meld of like your energy and all the crafts you work in. And like all your influences. And like, I guess like segueing from that, you can definitely tell in your videos that you are a teacher as well. Like you have a very
professorial sort of.
No, because I feel like that has bad connotations. No. It's not like you're lecturing someone, but it's a very engaging and
it feels like you're guiding us through the process as you're making it. Like it feels like we're kind of like there with you as you're making these videos. Like, 'cause we're like not, it's like the audience isn't removed. We're kind of engaged with it as you're making these videos. I don't know if that has to do with the editing, but that's one thing. Like I was able to watch your videos, and I don't have any maker background. Like I can't make like a birdhouse or anything like that. So for someone like me, I thought that it was very engaging watching those videos.
No, I appreciate that. I do love teaching. I'll always be a teacher. I started teaching actually back in high school. I was giving guitar lessons, driving around to house to house to house to house, and I loved it. So I've been teaching a long time, and I'll always be a teacher. You know what I mean? It's to me, it's a way to add value. That's important to me. So
yeah, definitely. And I guess like before I got caught up in my words, one of the things what I was trying to say is like I think not many people would think of teaching as an aspect of like your creative process. So do you feel like your experience teaching and like always being a teacher fits directly into your creative process?
Absolutely. If I had to think more, before we start recording, I was talking about OBS Studio and Stream Deck. So we're teaching remotely right now. And so the problem is a lot of folks, a lot of educators are trying to fit an old curriculum and an old way of teaching into Zoom. And it just doesn't work, right? So part of teaching is learning how to adapt and be creative and meet people at where they are. So with OBS and Stream Deck, a lot of them are gamers. So I, of course, like I have to adopt like gamer technology. So OBS allows you to do multi-cameras and all these kinds of like canned video clips that I can prepare. I have like sound effects. I can make like all kinds of like laugh tracks. And so my classes sound more like a late night show than a typical class. And we're bringing in guest speakers. I think on Monday, I'm teaching a grad class. We're bringing in a person from NBC who's in charge of the primary elections here in the United States to talk about data visualization. Recently, we read a book called Why School. The class was all mostly about like higher education and why it's failing. Well, I brought like the author of the book into class. So we're always trying to find creative ways to meet. I had recently. I had a lot of YouTubers and stuff on in some of the classes too. So yeah, here's the thing, Morley, Ryan. Most people don't know how to be creative, right? I do think it's a learned skill. I don't think it's something you're born with. I think it's something you need to exercise. And a lot of people don't exercise that skill. And particularly, like even in the department I'm doing, which is like the creative department, there are a lot of students who are more concerned with doing things right and checking off the boxes and then being creative and exploring. Because the problem is college tuition has gotten so expensive, people can't afford to fail. So a lot of what I'm trying to teach is trying to teach students to be creative and to take risks, and that it's okay to fail and mess up every once in a while, because honestly, that's how you learn. And sometimes it's a little bit painful to learn that way, but you'll know what you like and what you don't like. And if life is about doing more of what you like and less of what you don't like, checking off the boxes is not going to get you there all the time.
Like I totally understand what you mean. Like I just think back, like I graduated university a little over a year ago now, and just like if people were struggling in a class, they'd find it hard to enjoy the class and really take advantage of it to its full potential, because they were so worried about getting the grade and being able to pass the class. And even if they really were into the material, it's like because you have that kind of thing in the back of your mind where it's like, oh, if I fail this, like I have to spend all this money and do it again. It really holds people back from reaching that potential.
I agree with that as well. I noticed in my experiences, like there are a lot of people, like you mentioned, like that fear of failure is really overwhelming to some people. But I also noticed that there's also this social pressure. Like we always have like to make the good thing, even though you don't know what the good thing is. You want kind of like the praise rather than actually having the passion and putting the work in. So I think it's important for like people, regardless of whatever your creative passion is, to always have that willingness to go to try and do things. And even though something doesn't work out, I don't think that's a failure. I think it's only really a failure if you choose not to do something out of that fear. I think if you go try and do something, you're always learning, you're always building. We're kind of like consumed by this myth of like the baseball player comes down at the bottom of the ninth and hits the grand slam and wins the game, but that's not how it works. It's always about having learning and growing, not only as a creator or as an artist, but also as a person as well. And those experiences help give you that. And also, you can't learn to be better if you don't see what mistakes you did in the first place.
And exactly. And if you just do awesome, like you hit the home run the first time, every time, you're just going to take it for granted. You know what I mean? Like unless you go through the process and, make the mistakes and meet the people and have the wins and just spend the time and show up, you're not going to enjoy where you're at. You just take it for granted, and then you become miserable.
Yeah, exactly.
So the process is important. That's why I'm saying with the video stuff, like I just got to go through the process. I just got to allow myself to have the time to get to where I want to be.
Yeah.
And then once I'm where I'm at, then I'll bring something else into the mix. And then, you know what I mean? And that's the fun. That's what keeps you motivated. That's what keeps you, when you wake up in the morning, you want to spring out of bed and just get started, right? To not dread the day ahead of you. And that's a hard place to get to. And that's like, you know, it didn't happen until my 30s, right? You wake up excited and motivated and just like knowing how to like do that and just like want to and feel like that most days. It'd be like on a mission, basically, and not working on somebody else's mission all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that
just going from that, what are some of the unique challenges that you have faced as a maker and also as a content creator, and how have you overcome them?
The biggest challenge,
or just unique challenges, anything that you have faced.
Yeah. The biggest challenge. So I mentioned I went to NYU. That's like one of the most expensive schools in the world, and I paid full price. Mm-hmm. And then I got a job at this college, and I started out as like making $50,000, which didn't even really cover the loan costs every month. And so I started doing a lot of freelance work to make up that gap, and I'm still doing that freelance. So it's always been there hasn't been a lot of money, but luckily I may have been able to work hard enough. I always have had a side hustle since, you know, the day I was born, basically, to make up for that. You know what I mean? And that helps. And it also allowed me to learn things. So like when I was doing woodworking, I would just say yes to every job. And that wasn't always a good idea, but working for sign shops and product design companies and anybody who needed anything, just making it and learning along the way. But that's always been the biggest challenge is, you know, it's funny, you go to a college and it promises unlimited opportunity, but sometimes the tuitions are getting so high, it does the opposite of that. So yeah, it's a weird place to be, but because I worked extra hard on all the freelance and the side businesses and everything else, that's kind of like that was my like real education post college. That's how I learned woodworking and fabrication and everything else was through these jobs. But that's been the biggest struggle, trying to balance like a full-time job with all this extra freelance stuff while also doing creative work to keep myself motivated. It's always been a balance between that. And so, yeah, that's always a struggle, is the balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not getting burned out. Not getting burned out.
Do you feel like having kind of gone through these different paths, now you can kind of recognize when you're approaching burnout and you can kind of try to swerve around it?
I was talking with someone on the phone yesterday, an alum who works at Amazon, and talking about burnout, because it's once you get burnt out, sometimes you can't fix it. Like you're just burnt out and then you need to do something else. And so now I can see the signs and I know, you know what, I need to take a kayak out, or I need to take another run, or just take a break for a couple of days. But again, that's not something you learn until you've been burnt out at least once. I feel like it's like a 30s, when you're in your 30s kind of thing. You're like, I see this coming and I don't want that to happen again. So we need to
can't wait for that moment.
And, yeah.
Can't wait. Just looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, the burnout's a terrible, terrible thing. Yeah, because it's like you just fall out of love. It's like sad almost. You know what I mean? It's like just falling out of love with something that you loved so much. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I used to love programming as much as I love everything else. Now I'm like, after a couple of years, I'm programming again, which is
you kind of like stumbled back into it.
But I'm not making web apps almost ever. Like now I'm doing creative programming. So a part of that whole life was lost because I let myself get burnt out. Right. Now I will never let that happen.
But now the passion has returned, basically.
So now, which is, you know, part of the reason to push for videos, doing so much freelance work. And when you're doing freelance work, you're basically realizing other people's ideas. And when you have your own ideas, that can be a frustrating thing. There's a quote by Laurie Anderson. It says, when people don't express themselves, they die one piece at a time. And when you overload yourself working on other people's ideas and never your own, you get burnt out and you'll lose interest in the thing that you once loved. So I'm very careful that doesn't happen now.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. I feel like a lot of what we're touching on is that like to be like a successful creative person, like you said at the beginning, like many people aren't born creative. You have to work on it. You have to cultivate these skills, and you have to cultivate like a lot of habits and recognize a lot of things like throughout your life. Like it's so easy to just fall into a negative mindset. And all of a sudden, like nothing's driving anymore. So I'm absolutely agreeing kind of like the theme you're saying, which is like you really have to like stay on top of these habits and have a goal in mind and just be very mindful and intentional about like your creative passion and your passion in general.
Yeah, because it's a very fragile thing. It could fall apart. I mean, it could even sometimes you get one or two like negative YouTube comments, and then all of a sudden you think, well, what am I doing? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, it's amazing how those like one negative thing can just outweigh 10 positive things like that. It's like those positive things never happened.
Yeah. So just keeping yourself in check. It's important.
I think, and that's the other good thing that we were talking about before in terms of like having a few, experiences that don't always work out creatively, is that it gives you that perspective that even once you get those comments or negative feedback, you could still parse through it. You could be like, okay, well, whatever, and you could just keep going forward. Like I had a lot of difficulty dealing with that when I first began making videos and other types of short films. It was hard learning and trying, especially when I first started out, I was with other peers who were like more advanced than I was. So it was hard trying to feel like playing catch up all the time. But now I feel, since I've made my thesis documentary with Morley and other content creators last year, I just feel like I feel like I know I can still be better, but I know that I'm on the right track, and whatever feedback, and sometimes you have to take negative feedback with a grain of salt, because anyone could just say, it sucks, but is that it? Is that the best you can do? Like really, like it's, like constructive criticism is always good because you're learning from that. But I think once you get that perspective and you've done enough creative projects, you can feel that your own style, your own creative system, and you just know how to proceed going ahead in the future.
It's funny because as a professor, every semester you get feedback from all the students, right? And it's online. There's like rate my professors, and they put it out there for everybody to see. But it's also like internally, and the negative comments oftentimes are true. You know what I mean? And so it's your decision whether or not you want to work on that or not. And there are certain things that you should probably change about yourself to make yourself better. But there's certain times of like, well, you know what? I can live with that. If I'm not that organized, or if I'm not this enough or that enough, I can live with that. No big deal, because you can't be perfect. You can't do everything right 100% of the time, because then you'll be burnt out. You got to prioritize how you're going to spend your time. And if you prioritize making everything 100%, then nothing will be 100%. So sometimes negative feedback. Yeah, all right. That didn't make me laugh. Yeah. Oh yeah, it could have been this. Yeah, it's whatever. It's all good. So I let some of it gnaw at me, but some of it's like, well, all right, I accept that about myself. Yep, that's fine. It's all good. I'll never change that probably.
You're just gonna turn up the music by 12 decibels now.
Yeah. So. Yeah, actually, a lot of people, like especially students, like just trying to be perfect in everything. They're trying to get straight A's in every class, and I'm like, but then you're not prioritizing your time appropriately. Like if you want to get good at this one thing, you can't try to be 100% good at everything. You gotta prioritize your time and your effort and your thoughts and all that stuff. So
do you notice in your students, do you think young people in general, just take themselves too seriously?
No. It's a mix. It's such a mix. This could be a whole podcast topic. Students come from a lot of different backgrounds. You know what I mean? So they all have different life experiences. And for instance, here's an observation. And I've noticed that in general, students who have had jobs before, like whether they work in kitchens or they delivered pizzas or whatever, I feel like they generally do better in college and after college, because they've had the opportunity to work on something that wasn't for them, like serving somebody else essentially. The students who haven't had that job and maybe instead took like SAT courses to get a better test scores so they get more scholarships. They might get the scholarships, but oftentimes are less equipped to deal with college or life after college, because they didn't learn the skills of like working at a company or having a boss or anything other than like school. So I mean, there's so many variables. So, and then some of it's just personality. There's a lot of people who are forced into college that, quite frankly, just shouldn't go. And luckily now there are alternatives. You don't have to go to college. You can learn other ways. Like there are online classes, and so I wonder what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years when everything starts to equalize, that the people in college are the ones that should be in college, and the ones that would do better without it will find some alternative way. Yeah, which probably isn't like a popular thing as a professor to like say, but that's the honest truth. Like the health of of everybody would be better if we didn't force every single person.
I
in the
agree
world
with
to go
that
to
because
college.
I've been thinking about things like that too, and I think it's better for people to find different routes. I think people feel this pressure to kind of conform to this one route, and like I have to go do this to do this thing to get this degree so I can get X job, and I think that's like not the right way of looking at it. I think people have to look at what it is that they're passionate about and what they're good at, and just being able to find their way from there. But just touching on teaching, because was interested in like how does teaching impact your creative process as you're teaching your students? Do you ever like get feedback from them, or as you're interacting with them, do you ever get new ideas for projects, or just hear for something like, wow, I never thought about that before? And how does that impact the way that you make and design your own projects?
No, absolutely. Like teaching students is one of the biggest privileges in the world, and for a couple of reasons. One of the big reasons, though, is because younger people generally are. There's a very simple word for it. I can't think of the word, but they I'm gonna have to back up. Yeah, it's a very simple word, but why can't I think of the word? It's like it's right there. They're idealistic. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, so they're idealistic, and so they bring a freshness to and everything's good, and everything's gonna be great, and everything's gonna change the world. And being surrounded by people who are eager to change the world and who are idealistic keeps you fresh. Because when I work for a lot of companies, you see the opposite of that. You have everybody saying, well, we can't do that because this can't happen because that'll never work because, and students are never like that. They're like, bring it on. And they'll try it out. And it might, sometimes they play it too safe, but the idealism definitely, and just like the love of learning, and like, that's the default. Like you wake up wanting to learn. A lot of folks, like, I think they stop learning after they graduate from school. It's like learning stops. But it's like when you buy a car or something. It's like it needs maintenance. Like your learning needs maintenance all the time. Otherwise, you just can't do it anymore. So working with people who the default like thing is not making money, it's learning. That allows me to keep learning and learning and learning and learning and learning. And so I'm able to acquire skills. And a lot of times I bring all the business stuff into my class. So I'll bring in a project. I'm like, you know what? There's this sign company, and I botched this up. How do you think we should handle it? So, like, I bring a lot of, like, kind of like Morley, what you did with the chairs you're almost going to work on. I bring a lot of scenarios like there, and they appreciate that because it's funny thing is because when you bring like what you're actually doing in real world business, you don't need a big fancy curriculum to teach, right? You could be authentic, it could be raw, it could be true, and if you're teaching from a fancy curriculum, students see right through that. You know what I mean? You just got to be real. Like Jimmy DeRess is like one of the realest teachers. You just from being around him through osmosis, like you learn things, and it's your interactions, and you bring other people in. So I think the students keep me young, like at least young-minded. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest benefit. I think I'm more idealistic than most people my age, just because I'm around it more. Mm-hmm. That's a very long answer. So I couldn't think of the words.
No, that's a fantastic answer. Thank you for that.
I had my brain fart. You had yours. So you're keeping.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you an alternative word because I had a perfect word.
Has to be that word.
Has to be that one.
Yeah. I wanted to change gears a little bit to a specific type of projects you seem to have a real love for, which is data visualization.
Yes.
So what is it about data visualization that it's something that you keep coming back to? Because it is really interesting, but I don't think it's something that a lot of people are making stuff about.
No. And the one that I'm working on a data visualization project now that it's literally months in the making, but it's such a cool idea. I don't want to ruin it with a bad video. So I'm like letting it just take as long as it takes. Nice. Like the video needs to be good. I see the video in my head. I'm just not good enough to get there, but I will be in a few months. So it's gonna be awesome. So data visualization. Why do I love data visualization? Because what I was talking before, it combines all the things that I love. It's exploration, it's curiosity, it's learning, and it's really like you explore something that's always been right in front of you, but you can't see until you dig a little further. And but what I love about it is like oftentimes I get to do all kinds of like investigative stuff with the creative coding, right? You get to do all this kind of creative code and figure out, and you have all this data, and you have to take out the story, and then it's like, well, is that story worth it? And then you have to figure out the best way to communicate that story. So that could mean 100 different things. You could incorporate electronics. That could be a song, it could be music, it could be film, it could be something that's sculptural. So it's a way of storytelling using like math and data. Like it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating thing. So the project I'm working on right now is a way to show solar data anywhere in the world. And it sounds like super boring. And I came across that project by playing with a Python library called PySolar. And basically it allows you to put in a time of the day and a geolocation, and it spits out a number. And that's how much like units of solar radiation are like within a square meter. That's all you know. And so I did it over my house, and I'm like, okay. So I did a different time, and it was like a different value. Wow, that's really cool. It's a different value in the winter than it is the summer. So then I wrote a ton of code, all this code in Python and everything, to get all the values for every hour of every day in an entire year. Well, that's really cool, but it's still just a spreadsheet. You can't see it. So I'm like, wow, I can write some JavaScript and then turn that data into shapes, and then I'll write something to turn those shapes into SVGs, and I'll bring it over to the laser cutter, and I will cut them all out, and you'll see something that looks like this. Sorry for the listeners. So this is Beijing, China, right?
Okay.
Let me get you another one. This is Seattle, Washington, which looks very different. I know you can't see it, but then if you look at like Iceland or like somewhere in Alaska, the shapes start looking very different.
So for the
really cool.
For the listener, it's like a series of laser cut discs and like different oblong shapes, and I'm guessing that each like Z-axis layer is like a time of the year, and then as it turns, is that the time of day? Is that kind of how it works?
It's actually close, but the opposite. So
Okay.
each one of these is a different hour starting at midnight. And so this is like noon. So this would be the summer months where it's really bulging. And in the back is the winter months. So every place on the planet, you can see a different shape and instantly see how the sun affects that area. So these are just the prototypes just to see if the concept works. And I showed the author of the PySolar library, who happens to also be a maker, found out over in Boston. And he goes, I've been working with this data forever. I've never actually seen it. This is fascinating. It's like, and he named some kind of weird shape that I didn't understand. He's like, I can't believe it's the shape. So then you take that, like, now what are we going to do with it? So now I'm loading it up with Arduinos and LED strips and working with different kinds of plastics and wood. And I have this big burl that looks like the sun. And I'm making that into like, so now it's going to be this big sculptural lamp that's going to be perfect. That like, yeah, it's going to be so cool. So I'm working with some timing circuits right now to make sure so it lights up based on where it is. So like it's a process. It's it's like a science experiment, and you get to explore your way through it because you don't know where it's going to end up.
Yeah, you could take it in like a million different, to the nth degree in a million different directions.
I'm teaching a data visualization class now. I also teach one at NYU called Making Data Tangible, and just the stories people are uncovering in that class, they're just unbelievable. So it's
I remember in university when I took a class, it was actually at a hydrology class, which has a lot of visual data. So like if rain enters the watershed at this point, what is the river response going to be 10 miles away over time? And I remember one of the things she said in the lecture was, when you're analyzing data, the first thing you need to do is just look at it. And it's funny, like from a university mind point, someone who's thinking about like, how am I going to apply this to an exam? I remember a lot of people in the class, and myself included, were thinking like, why would you, like, what are we going to do with that? How are we going to apply that on a test? Like, how am I going to look at this data and describe it? But it's so true. Like, you really have, it's so important, like, with a data set, to just know what it looks like. Because it's really hard to gain any sort of meaning from it without a visual. And I think a lot of people struggle with that in just understanding science in general, like general science literacy, not even scientists, but just like people understanding government policies and things.
When you teach a class like data visualization, or any class for that matter, you're never really teaching data visualization. You're teaching people how to think critically about data and how to not to jump to conclusions, right? You're teaching digital fabrication. You're not teaching digital fabrication because chances are most people aren't going to be doing that for a living. You're teaching like all kinds of like resourcefulness and other things. So when you're a teacher, there's always a fancy label slapped on the class, but if you've been teaching long enough, you're actually usually teaching something else, something a lot more important than the term or whatever's in the title of the class. So data visualization is definitely one of those courses. You're not really teaching data visualization. But you also learn some data visualization. Tableau is really fun to work with, and you're learning some cool stuff in Excel, and there's some math, and it's good. It's some good times.
Cool. A
lot of laughs. Yeah. So we're doing one on prisons now, but that's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One of my students is doing something on prison, so I got to call somebody up who works in a prison to see if they're right. So I'm going to have them join our next class. They're a prison guard.
Wow.
So that'll be a weird. I'm going to surprise them. Yeah.
That's incredible. That's just hearing about some of these projects that you're working on is just so impressive. How do you always find new ideas for these types of projects? How do you get this inspiration from?
They usually start as a seed of something, and then they just sort of incubate and grow. There's a book, and again, I'm blanking on the name of the book. I don't remember it. I'll remember it by the end. But it always starts as something simple. So for instance, I have a list of Jimmy Dress has like a book of something. I'm not that organized, but I have a list of about 20 projects I want to make. And some of them are really simple. Like I was playing with an accelerometer, and then based on how it moves, like you can hook it up to an MP3 shield and play certain noises. So you start thinking about it. And so like the easiest thing to do was maybe to put that inside of like a red, like Mario hat that you could put in your laser cutter, put the logo on, and when you jump, it makes like the Mario jumping noise. Like that might like seed the idea. Like that's really easy. Kids could make that. That'd be so fun. And you can learn about acceleration. But then I'm like, well, I could put it in a car. I could put it here. I could make my tools sound like ultra crazy. Like want to pick up the drills, like you know what I mean. You could do like so. You just dream of what it could be, and then one day. You just start working on it, and then you put it down, and then like this data visualization I'm working on with the solar thing. I've been working on that for months. It gets done when it gets done because I keep adding to it. So, and I'll talk more about that when, I don't know if at the end we talk about like what we're watching a little bit. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I got a good one. It's like my favorite. Yeah. Okay. It's like the ultimate YouTuber. It's my ultimate, like, oh my gosh, like what he's doing is amazing, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah.
I feel like you and Destin from Smarter Every Day are like ripe for a collaboration.
Oh, someday, yeah. That now you're trying to make me feel good.
No,
I love what he does. Yeah, there's so many of them. There's so many now. There's so much inspiration out there, and YouTube's just such a huge place. Mm-hmm. But there's so many creators out there that are doing a really amazing work, like Dustin, and But it's good to see that there's an audience for that now. Like it seems like with television days, I'm really showing my age in this podcast. You couldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like. And I think that even with your Clamped podcast that came up, like something like did Jimmy say something like Colin Furs wouldn't have had a platform?
Yeah, I was trying to remember where I heard that, and yeah, you're right. It was Jimmy saying that.
Yeah, and he's right.
You're saying like Colin Furs is like the perfect person for YouTube.
10 years. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are certain people like really great for podcasts, and there's people, you know what I mean, in the new forms that haven't been built yet. Mm-hmm. So it's the most expressive time in human history, and I think people forget that sometimes.
Oh yeah, the tools that we have now, like before, like if you wanted to be a filmmaker, if you want to do anything like that, you had to buy actual film stock, and that's not cheap. And now it's like we have all the tools accessible through digital cameras and podcasting. Like when I was doing my documentary on content creators and just seeing how people are able to create this grassroots sort of storytelling and being able to express themselves in all these different ways, like you guys are doing through your own channels and your own projects. It's inspiring to see.
But there's also creators, like we don't give people credit who like lead programs, for instance. Like if you're running a podcast, that is just as much like being a creator as like building like a birdhouse. Yeah, like taking something and making something bigger out of taking a seed idea and building it and building and building it. So,
yeah. And podcasting is really just like YouTube because it was grassroots, like now when you have Conan O'Brien's doing podcasts, like they didn't make podcasting popular. It was people building this throughout like the last decade, just having interesting conversations. And now it's entire area of media that's just exploded. And that's why we're doing this show now, because we just love having the opportunity to have these very long conversations and just being able to share knowledge like that.
It's an amazing time we're living in terms of this kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's funny, like I think so even with like all the tools we had at our disposal, sometimes I still find myself like if I finish a project and I look in the video footage folder, I'm like, okay, I have 100 gigabytes of data, like of video, or like 50 gigabytes of video or whatever, and it's like I'm like, should I feel like I'm wasting resources using that. Like, I almost like can't fathom that you can so easily create so much video data and it's essentially free. It's like the cost of the hard drive. And then I just think back on when they were making videos on film, and it's like, if you shoot all these feet of film, like Ryan was saying, it costs however many thousands of dollars. And I feel like it forms a little bit of cognitive dissonance sometimes where I'm like, I could just get all this footage and it's like free. It's incredible how much you can do with like digital tools. And
Yeah, it's amazing. And like the fact that I was able to edit like my 30-minute long documentary just on my MacBook that I'm using right now, and I was scared it was just gonna burst into flames at any moment. But thankfully that didn't happen. But like there's always like new challenges that arise from it. But I'd say there's more benefits than there are cons.
And I'm just someone who gets a lot of satisfaction about getting as much done as I can with the smallest resources as possible. Like I love just using a cheap bike as long as I can and just riding it into the ground, or using the cheap tool and just trying not to buy the expensive tool if I don't have to.
That's incredible. I mean, what you've done, because I've seen your workshop, it's a pretty tiny space, and you produce so much content out of like literally a corner of a room. To me, that's still incredible.
Like it definitely, wow, finding words today is so difficult. It's a source of inspiration, but also it is limiting. Like I would love one day to move into a larger space, but I feel like my style and what I do is so linked to working out of a small space, because like as I've started making to any large extent, it was starting in university, and I mean really when I was growing up it was in my bedroom. Like I had just drawers full of parts and little DIY firecrackers and everything else. It's like that's what I've always done in corners of rooms.
But there's something to be said about like having that constraint too. Like if you have no constraints, if you have no constraints, then the challenge is gone. Like at least like this, I'm in a pretty tiny, like a 1-car garage, so that limits. It's hard to do like really big projects. I built an entire bar in here once, and that was like the size of like a car, and that was like the most difficult project I've ever done. So most of my projects have to be small. Like, and more, if you had a huge space, I don't know if you ever would have made like Penny's Patch, right? Like that was something that like you painted leather, and then like if you had all the space in the world, you probably would have been making river tables every day, which is nothing wrong with that. But you know what I mean? Like those constraints sometimes can help, right?
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think like some of the best creativity comes from overcoming those constraints, whether it's like a lack of budget or a lack of resources. You always find new ways just being able to either visualize or express something in something that's fun. Like I remember one of the first video projects I ever had to do, the professor forbid us from like not using a tripod. Everything had to be on a tripod. We couldn't do anything fancy. And just being able to go out and just film something in a way to try and make it as visually dynamic as possible.
Yeah, that was one of my big takeaways too when we were talking with Julia and her experience in art school. He's like, you have to just take a random item from a convenience store and make a brand for it. I was like, oh, that's like, you give someone this very small box to work with it and just see how like the creativity blooms. It's such an amazing seed. And I mean, just to say one more thing about like the power of constraints. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. If you think like, how many children of billionaires are successful artists? And I think the answer is not very many.
Well, it's Clay. Do you know? I don't even know Clay Shirky. I'm going to get his quote wrong, but he used to say that abundance causes more problems than scarcity, and he said it in a more elegant way. But when you think about that, if you have all of the resources available to you in the world, a lot of people are paralyzed by that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's nice to have some kind of constraint, even if that's why I like the Bentwood challenge. I had the video there. Like that was a really interesting constraint to work around, but at least it grounded you. It gave you something to like measure your progress from that constraint. So when you can do everything, I think people actually, it loses some of the value. It starts to feel a little bit like empty calories almost.
Yeah, it's overwhelming, and even at that, if you have all the tools at your disposal, that doesn't mean you know how to use those tools in the right way.
Perhaps. It's like a little kid with like unlimited amount of toys. You know what I mean? They're not any more happy than somebody with just like a box of Legos oftentimes.
Dudley Dursley.
Right. Yeah. Although with that said, I have a list of stuff I want to get within the next 2 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
So many. I'm like, if I just had this one more tool, I would be happy. If I just had this one more thing, I could do anything.
Yeah, but it's a balance, right? Like you're not gonna build from a cave with no electric outlets.
Right.
But it is nice to have a
Well, you
cave with
could.
electric outlets.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I guess too, like it's manageable. I just when I look at Jimmy DeResta's shop and I was like, how does he like mentally even handle that much stuff? Like just knowing there's that much stuff. And
Well,
like,
probably because he built it. Like
yeah.
like you start from nothing and then you get something and then you get something else and then it's all organic and it's all still kept in your head somehow.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of responsibility to keep track of all that. So, I don't think I'll ever have an enormous shop like that, but sometimes, we all dream. We all dream of like, what it would look like if we had unlimited resources, and I think we do. Yeah. But honestly, the mission would be pretty much the same. Like it's really all of it's mission grounded. You know what I mean? If you don't have a mission or something you're trying to accomplish, then what's the point of any of it? It doesn't matter what kind of tools you have. So
yeah,
I get excited for a new tool for about 3 days, and then it just becomes like part of the, it doesn't last very long. Yeah.
Yeah, becomes an appliance.
Yeah, but those 3 days are pretty awesome. I remember when I got my ShopBot CNC or my Glowforge, I was blown away. I was like, this is like amazing. This is a future. Or even like Elchrone stuff. I'm like, this is a computerized arm. It's like, oh my God. But then it just becomes, part of the practice, part of the process.
I was wondering about this. Are there a lot of collaborations that happen within the maker community, like on YouTube and others, in order to maybe like try do some bigger projects or like share tools or anything in that area?
I'll answer first. I don't think not enough, but more like, what do you think?
I agree. I think the maker community is made up of a lot of like very resourceful individuals, and yeah, I think the possibility of collaborations have definitely not been exploited to their full potential. There have been some, but the majority of videos I watch is like a single creator working on their own idea.
I think I would like to see from the maker community too, and I'm not knocking anybody specifically, but I see a lot of people just like, well, this week we're gonna make and then they make like something like for their house, when there are a lot of people that could use things like maybe you could make a little library for the town you live in instead of making like another end table for yourself or something. Like I think about that a lot. Like, when you make things, you have like this gift that you can give to other people. Like you can help other people out.
Yeah. And
so I know like, so Morley, has anybody ever asked you to make something for them? Like, Morley, you think you could do this for me? Or it's like, like as a maker, like you're always doing favors for people. But I think
definitely.
I think as a maker, if you have that kind of platform, I think it would go a long way, for instance, to like maybe make stuff for an animal shelter. And to like, and not to be political about it, but just to help folks who maybe need a little help once in a while. I wish I saw a little bit more of that in the maker community. But with that said, the maker community is the most positive place I think I've ever seen. Yeah. Like my programming community when I was a web developer did not feel like the maker community. It was a very dark and horrible place. The maker community is the most amazing community I've ever met. You know what I mean? Everybody helps each other out. They all elevate one another. They all sell each other's work. They welcome everybody. It's overall like super positive. But sometimes I wish the projects would be more like community focused or something along those lines. Yeah. And there are a few.
And it's like even just you saying that, it actually makes me excited to think about because I think I've heard people. I'm not going to name any names, but I've heard some people say over the years that like has the maker bubble burst or has the maker bubble peaked. And I think just from you saying that, the answer is no, because I think it hasn't reached its full potential at all.
Not at
by
all.
Any means.
Not at all.
I think
we haven't even started.
Yeah. I think people thought maybe like 3 years ago that was like, oh, it's DIY woodworking videos. That's all it is. But
no. It's just so much to do. It's, yeah. And making something is like one of the most liberating things you can do. Yeah. And we're never going to run out of that stuff. So, no, we're just getting started for sure. For sure.
And, I mean, in terms of making for a higher cause, I loved your video on the Emerald Ash Borer data visualization.
Oh, thank you.
There's not a lot of creators making like story-driven videos like that, when like calling attention to an issue, making a project about it, and it was really interesting. And that is a big problem that doesn't many people that aren't environmentalists or forestry specialists don't really know a ton about that. And
I don't know how it is in Canada, but right now, like I'm looking around and there's a lot of dead trees just like in the neighborhood, and nobody even notices or knows what's happening. But they know they're all coming down. And I do wish that we saw more storytelling. That's why I love like Laura becomes videos. They're story driven because as humans, we're natural storytellers, or we're supposed to be anyways. So yeah, I think we could infuse a lot more storytelling into build videos for sure. And instead of always the hows, but maybe the whys and the whos and all those kinds of words instead of just the hows. But then I don't know, but I like a good how-to video. That's usually why I go to YouTube in the first place. So I don't know. I'm just confused everybody else where this is going. Every day my YouTube channel is like, oh, it's going to be this. It's going to be a storytelling platform, and it's going to be like, sometimes it's going to be educational, and so who knows?
But that's a good thing though, because I didn't know anything about making up until about a year ago or so when my best friend introduced Morley's when I was trying to find candidates for my documentary. And then, like, at first he sold it to me. It's like, oh, he builds things. I was like, okay. And then I just went to watch his YouTube channel. And then I just went down this rabbit hole, watching all different, not just his videos, more of these videos, but watching all different types of makers from all different types of backgrounds. So I'm surprised when people say, like, is it over? Because to me, it's this very specific genre that's not really being made elsewhere. And it can be evolving in so many different ways, so many different styles, like you said, either in terms of education, storytelling, community-based, or just individual fun projects. So, no, I think it's an interesting genre. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
I teach a class, and so one of my missions when I'm teaching now, we were trying to teach a welding class, and we taught it, and it was amazing. But one of the students came up to me and they said, my dad won't let me take the welding class. And I said, why not? It's like, he said he was paying money for me to go here to use my mind, not my hands. And I was like, whoa. And that's so true. I've had a lot of folks like, no, it's just too dangerous. I'm here to use my brain. It's like beneath them to like do something with but I think if you're using your brain, your hands, and like your spirit all at the same time, there's a really good book called Soul Craft to Shop Craft. I might have it a little bit mixed up, but when you're doing all three things, using your brain, your hands, and like your spirit to work on something, like that's for me, that's when I'm happiest, right there. So now I'm on a mission to like make sure people at least can experience that once. And if you're a maker, there's like a very default thing where like there's like a throwaway culture where like, oh, if something broken, or you just always buy, always just go to Amazon, or but if you can make your own stuff, like that is, to me, that is the most empowering things. And in terms of like students today, a lot of them are complaining because, there's no jobs out there. I can't find a job. Well, if you're a maker, you can make your own job. You don't need somebody else. You don't want to work a job. You want to make your own job. You want to, you have ideas too.
It's like that. I mean? It's like that quote from The Social Network when the Winklevoss twins. Is it the Winklevoss twins? Am I remembering that correctly?
Winklevoss. Yeah.
When they go to the dean, and they're trying to like get Mark Zuckerberg in trouble or in legal trouble, and he says to them, he's like, this isn't my problem, and get out of my office. But what he says is, Harvard students don't go and get jobs; they make their own jobs.
Really? Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. And when I was young, like that's not something people would say. Like you're supposed to do well in school so that you would get a good job, and then you would get a nice this, and then a nice that, and then you retire. But no one ever said, hey, you know what, man? You could just make your own job, like do your own thing and figure it out, and it'll be all yours. And like that's one thing I do want to teach students. And through my channel, I'm using students loosely. Eventually, through the channel, I want to be able to empower people to do the things that they feel passionate about. Because there's always somebody telling you that you shouldn't do it, or you can't do it, or or whatever. It's always easier not to, and just to kind of like do the safe thing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you should do the safe thing, but not always. Yeah. Know when to pick the right opportunities. Yeah. And don't take what you're doing for granted, because it goes by so fast, I feel like.
Empowering is definitely a word I would use when I think of making. And the more I'm kind of in this community and the more I make stuff, the more I think, like I told Ryan, that it's less of a genre and more akin to like an artistic movement. Same way Romanticism or Classicism or the Renaissance was, in that it is a reflection of the culture and the current state of the world as it is right now. Like We've gone through like this state of massive prosperity in the 20th century and consumer culture. And now we're at a time where like entrepreneurs and inventors and idealists are like really idolized, and like making is a way that a lot of people can kind of like realize that dream in a very palpable way in their own life and just get to places they never thought they could before. Like the way you're making like probably things that you never would have dreamed you'd be making.
You're right. And another thing I love about the maker community in that regard, it's not a contest like so many other disciplines. You know what I mean? We all elevate each other, and it's just a much kinder community.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot to be learned there. Not everything has to be a competition all the time. So we're not like it's not like, oh, well, your shop is so much bigger. Of course you can, it's like, we're all in this together, which sounds totally cliche, but as a group, we are like that. The Saturday Zooms showcase that we got all different kinds of people on there, mm-hmm. and it's a level playing field, and that's a beautiful thing because you don't find that other places, especially right now in this world. So, yeah, I'm super happy. I wish I discovered the maker community a little earlier, but I don't even know if it was around. I don't know, like, when did it start emerging in its like sort of current form?
Yeah, we need a
do you know?
A maker historian. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to know when you grew up with YouTube.
Yeah.
So that leads me into a question, and you can't say finding the maker community earlier in that. If you could give advice to your younger self, let's say 20 years old, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Oh no, this is gonna be another podcast. I would say talk with older people more often.
Great, we're nailing it.
Yeah. I think that would be it, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in older people that when you're young you just brush off because you know everything. And then the older I get, the more I'm learning it's true. I'm also learning that sometimes older people are just simply out of touch. But there are times when there's some wisdom to be gained. And I don't think it's any mistake that Jimmy DiResta is like the godfather of the maker movement. He's one of the older people in the community. And I think a lot of people look up to him for that reason. He's been through it all. He's been through all of it. And so I think there's wisdom in older people. And, I think that's probably it. And also, compound interest. Know what that means before you take out, $50,000 in credit card debt.
Okay.
And $200,000 in student loan debt. Yeah.
Will do.
That too.
So a quick story to support your wisdom in older people advice is that one time Eden and I were in Quebec City and we were looking for a place to go to lunch, and we were on Yelp. We were trying to find like what's like the best lunch place in Quebec City. And the best places, of course, all had lines out the door. And we're like, oh, we're not going to stand in line. We're going to walk around and try to find a little hole in the wall. And with the amount of time we spent walking around, we're like, we could have just got into one of those other restaurants by now. And who were all the people waiting in line at the restaurants? It was people in their 60s and 70s, because they knew that it's not worth the effort to go and try to find that other spot. They've been around the block enough to know that you just got to wait in line for a little bit and then you'll be in.
My grandfather used to say, "Oh, this place is packed to the gills," and he would never go to a restaurant without a line because he thought that meant something,
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So you just deal with the line. Yeah.
Yeah, you got.
Yeah, but otherwise, no good. If there's no line, there's people don't want to be there.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who has family in Quebec City, I can tell you that every restaurant is a great restaurant. Oh my God.
Really? That's just...
Yeah, it was great. I love Quebec City. I've only really spent a day there, but it was really, really cool.
I really have to get up there. I really, really do. Well, I don't even know if we're allowed right now, but soon.
Yeah. When the end of the world is over, I would love to give you guys a tour. I've been to all the historical spots.
That'd be great. I would love that. I really would. Yeah.
I don't really want to cut this short because I feel like it's a great conversation. I mean, Ryan, did you have any other topics you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I feel like I've been talking the whole time. I want to hear more about Ryan. Ryan, what's your jam?
What's my jam? Oh man, how do I begin my tragic origin story?
Because we only heard about you in episode 0. Yep.
Well, it's like, what else can I say? I'm building from episode 0. Like, I'm a filmmaker, writer, photographer, and I'm someone who's been doing this. I've always had a passion for this sort of area since I was about 8 or 9 years old, when my parents got me a digital camera. I was making little movies, how the cliche goes. And then eventually when I got to university, I started doing communication studies with a focus on media, and I started learning how to do video production that way, learning how to do audio editing, trying and failing very hard many times, doing different types of projects, but not failing in the sense like it was just, trying different projects. Sometimes you work with a team, sometimes it doesn't work out. Then you work on something else, and it's the best thing ever. So after that, I had to sustain my passion for media, and then I did my master's in media production at Ryerson here in Toronto. And then from then on, I wanted to make a documentary about content creators and YouTubers and learning more just about, new types of storytelling. And then, looking for candidates, met my great friend Morley here and, filmed it, got my master's degree. So it was a good film overall.
That's awesome.
And from then on, I'm just trying to find new ways to do different types of creative projects. This podcast is something I've wanted to do for such a long time. Just being able to interview and learn from different types of creative people, even people, not from my discipline whatsoever, but just hearing what they do and seeing how I can find new ideas for projects that I'm working on. Just trying to find, like you mentioned, the balance before. I think it's just trying to learn more people how they find that balance and how I can apply that to my own situation, because almost once a week I have an idea for either a new short film or a new documentary or a new maybe music video that I would like to work on with someone, and this happens all the time. So I'm someone who has an idea fall on him at least once a day or once a week, and I'm just trying finding ways to just make sense of it all, and just being able to find and fulfill my creative passions much in the same ways that you guys are fulfilling your creative passions through making and YouTube and other pursuits. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. My story can go on and on forever and ever, but there's a lot to talk about. I don't know. I think I'll need 5 parts in order to get through that.
Sometimes there's a defining moment. For instance, when I went to NYU, our chairperson, her name was Red Burns, and she founded the program in 1979. And when she was running the place, she was in her 80s, and she was and she had started when she got the Cinepack recorder, and it was the first handheld camcorder, and she used it to show how I think a traffic light was dangerous, and then she used that information to get that fixed. And that was for her the most empowering thing ever. And she basically, from an earlier age, said there's going to be social media someday. Was there ever a defining moment when you realized, okay, I'm on this, this is it, this is what I want to do? For me, it was 2 of them. I saw the Mr. Rogers film, and I was like, I want to do that when I grow up. That's what I want to do. And another time when I went into a makerspace and I felt the energy emanating from both the machines and the people and the smell, and I said, this is it. Everything's different now. Have you guys ever had a moment where it's just this is it, at least for the next couple of years?
Yes. I don't know. Do you want to go first, Marley, or
no? I need to think a little.
Am I allowed to ask questions on podcasts? Never been on a podcast before.
No, Ryan, you go. I need to pause.
I was feeling I'm too much attention on me.
No. There was a moment. When I was about, I would say 16, 17, 18, sometime around 17. Because when I was growing, I'm from a small town in eastern Quebec, so it's like a fishing village. It's kind of like New Englandy a bit, but all French. That's the best way I can describe it. And I was growing up there, and it's not like a media town. It's like a fishing and tourism sort of town. So there wasn't anyone with a lot of media experience. I had all this passion in media, for filmmaking and for storytelling and for writing and photography, but there weren't a lot of people around me that had those experiences. So I grew up learning a lot of things on my own. I would watch, the behind the scenes of, movies on DVDs, and just trying to learn from interviews and seeing how they're making different types of movies from the biggest blockbusters to the small independent features. And I would go on, the internet trying to learn about all that stuff, but it's not the same because there wasn't really someone there to help me learn about those things, right? You can learn online as much as you want, but having someone there to help you and teach you, and just being able to discuss that with them it can change your perspective completely. So when I was about 17, I learned about this filmmaker named Paul Allman. Paul Allman was a filmmaker from my home region in the Gaspé region, and he was a man who just started doing the first television productions for the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, in the 1950s. And then he transitioned and did films for, independent films. He did Hollywood films. He worked with Paramount Pictures in the 1960s. And I didn't know about this, but he would come back to our home region every summer in his village for about throughout the whole time I was growing up. So I first learned about him when I was working at the museum, at my local museum in Gaspé, Quebec, and there was a book launch for photographers. She was having a book launch at a museum, and I was working that night, running around trying to do admission tickets and selling drinks and whatnot. And he was there that night, and this was kind of like, it felt like Luke Skywalker seeing Obi-Wan Kenobi for the first time. It was almost overwhelming. And he came by and he chatted with me. I said to him, and he also had a book series about his life. He wrote a book about his own autobiography about his family experiences and how he became a filmmaker and a storyteller and an artist and an author. So when I met him, that was the moment, really. Like, I would chat with him. I told him like I have a very big passion for filmmaking, and I think he spoke with me for about like almost an hour when he didn't have to. And it was just so inspiring. I remember he told me, he's like, "Oh, you want to go to film school? Like, go to Loyola," he would say. He was just really nice to talk about. He talked about how to film things, how to get started right away, how to work with others, and always to have. And he's the one who gave me that sense of perspective to always keep creating, even when times are tough, even when you feel it's down. Like, it's worth it to keep creating because it fulfills your soul. And I never forgot that. And so he was someone I met. And then after that, I figured out that I wanted to go study communications and media. And that's how I ended up going to Concordia, Montreal, Quebec to learn that. And then that just led to where I am now. So that was really the moment. That was the catalyst, not only for me deciding to follow through on my passions, on my interests, but also on the path that I am now, and I owe that a lot to him. And
go ahead. I'm so
sorry. No,
no,
it's okay. And it's also, there's also a bit of irony because he passed away about a year after that encounter that I had with him. Because I remember, because there was interviews to get into my bachelor's program at Concordia in communications, and he passed away the week in April when I was up there doing my interview. And I felt really sad afterward because I was like, I was hoping to see him again so I could learn more. And, and as much as that sucked, then I found out a few weeks later that I got into the program. So I just felt that maybe it was a sign. I don't know. Because he told me to go to Loyola Film School when I mentioned that conversation. And then when I went home, I Googled to see Loyola Film School. Then I see, okay, Los Angeles, California, some $60K in tuition. I'm like, close the computer. I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen. But there's something ironic because like the campus that I went to where I learned how to do video production and everything else is called Loyola Campus.
Oh, cool. That's crazy.
So there's just something, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's because like I do too much writing and storytelling. But to me, there's a greater significance to that. So. Yeah, it's because of someone like that who he showed me that a guy who came from where I come from, where I grew up, couldn't make it. That was inspiring to me. That okay, it's not this far away fantasy that the privileged few can do. This is something that anyone can do, and he was able to do it. So why can't I? And he gave me that inspiration to really follow through on that, and I will always appreciate that.
There's there's some data somewhere that says the thing that for students, the most successful students are successful for basically one reason, and it's not a fancy curriculum. It's not like anything to do with like college proper, I guess.
Right.
The thing that makes people successful, students successful when they leave, is that if they have someone like a professor that they look up to give them 15 minutes of time, dedicated time, and permission to do something great, they said that's honestly like that matters more than any particular class or any particular curriculum or field trip or anything. So yeah, having a conversation with somebody like that makes the world a difference.
Oh, so. And he took a genuine interest when he didn't have to.
Yep.
Like, I was just like the employee working there, and he took an hour of his time just to chat with me. And there are all these people socializing and gathering, and he did that. And
it's like Jimmy Dress says, being nice is free.
Exactly. But
yeah.
I will always thank him for everything because he gave me that confidence to really go for it when I didn't have confidence in myself. He was able to see something, and
that's awesome.
I will always love that moment, that memory.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's interesting, like I think you almost said like it almost felt like it was meant to be, but maybe that's just like the storyteller in me. I kind of have this like,
of course it was meant to be.
I kind of have this like theory about fate, in that like I don't believe in fate as in like things are predestined, but I think that having a mindset of that, like, you have something that you're supposed to do, or that, like, you shouldn't just do anything. Like, you should be trying to find that thing. And you could maybe call that fate, but just having that mindset, it kind of just gives you the permission to kind of tune into those little clues throughout your life and feel like, no, this feels really right, or that feels wrong. And I think just operating under an assumption that, like, there are, like, important moments that you should act on, and you could call that fate or you could not call that fate, is just like a good way to think about it. And I think that's kind of like, it's hard to think of one defining moment, like with John's question for me, but I feel like I've had a lot of, like, little clues that I've tried to follow in my life so far. Like, I remember one, I've talked about this before, but, like, when I was working in my engineering office job, I was out at like a bar and club with Eden in Toronto. And I remember just looking around and feeling like I feel like I'm becoming a yuppie, and I am not like these people anymore, and I don't want to be a yuppie yet. I just feel like I'm in the wrong place. And it was similar at the office. Like, it was just feeling like I was not in the right place. This is a great job, but it's not a great job for me right now. And I think maybe when I was in school or younger, it was hard for me to kind of, like, follow those clues because I was kind of operating on, like, a certain trajectory. But then, like, you're spit out into the real world afterwards, and it's a little easier to kind of follow those clues.
That's pretty much spot on. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But a lot of people, you know, they're not that intuitive. They're not that reflective. You know, they don't recognize those opportunities all the time, and that's a little bit tragic. But that's life. We don't get all of them, but hopefully we can get some.
It takes a lot of maturity and just a real sense of self and understanding of who you are to make those decisions, and that takes a lot of respect, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, and some people just don't have, like, the freedom to follow their intuition. Like, there was plenty of people at that company who were like, that was like, I felt kind of bad kind of voicing that I wasn't happy in this very good position, because, like, there's plenty of people in that company that were like, this is everything I dreamed of, like, coming from an immigrant family. This is very stable. It's good work. I can progress. I can keep moving up in the salary ladder. But just kind of coming from, like, a privileged position, it's a little difficult to, like, take that. It sounds bad, but, like, kind of, like, take advantage of that privilege that you have. Because, like, I had these savings from the summer. I made money all summer, and I spent none of it. And I was like, I can just spend some time making a little bit of money and slowing the bleed. And that's what I should be doing. And it's actually been something that's kind of been difficult for me to do, is fully take advantage of my situation. And I think maybe some of that is, like, worrying what other people think. But I feel like that's somewhere where I definitely have some room to grow.
I think I struggle with something very similar. Yeah, even having, like, I worked so hard for the shop. When I first got the shop, we busted out windows and cinder block, and I learned how to do everything from the drywall to electricity, the framing, everything. I bought every tool I can point to. Like, I got that tool because I performed these 3 jobs. That was like 4 signs worth of work. That was this horrible freelance gig. That was this really easy one. And now that I have it all, sometimes it's hard to find enough time to get in here and just, like, I feel like I'm never living up to the shop's potential sometimes. Like, even especially with the video content sometimes I'm making, I'm like, I could be making anything. Why am I making, like, router template tutorial videos? Like, I can make anything, And I try, like, well, it's okay. So I try to but yeah, I think a lot of us struggle with that. Yeah. Of having these resources and then not living up to our fullest potential, and having a little bit of guilt with that. But even in jobs and stuff too. Yeah. But that's, most people that I know wouldn't trust their intuition just to be like, well, I know this is a great job, but I'm just not feeling it, so I'm gonna leave. You know what I mean? Most people just don't do that. So that's really important that you did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. And I think if I could give advice to my younger self, I think I should have taken a gap year before going to school. Like, I'm really happy that I studied what I did, and I think it made a lot of sense at the time. I gained a lot of valuable skills that I am using, and I mean, I might go back to civil engineering. Like, who knows what will happen in 5 years, but I think, kind of like what Ryan was touching on earlier, graduating high school and then feeling like you need to, like, make a decision, but you don't actually realize the significance of the decision. I just think I should have taken a gap year, and I think more people should in general, and just not really feel like you have to be 18 at university.
I agree. The maker community is all different ages and everything, and I think college would be better if it was all different ages, like, but just didn't stop at 24. Like, you should be able to return at any time.
Yeah.
Like, when the time's ready.
Maybe this is a thing in Canada that is not as much in the States, but like, I had someone in my program who was like 46, and he looked really young, so I thought he was my age for a while, but he like was a construction worker, and then he's like, no, I want to be a project manager, and then decided to go back to school. But I know certain schools do have age limits, which I think is kind of sad.
Really? Yeah, it's sometimes it's not like an exact rule, like we won't let you in, but you're gonna feel out of place, right? And like continuing, like when they call, even what they call it, like continuing education, it just, I don't know, it doesn't sound the same. I think education, speaking of opportunities, is a missed opportunity, especially right now where everyone's starting to reevaluate their own careers and futures. But that's another podcast topic. I would love to start my own school someday. Like, I'm hoping that eventually this channel, and I've always wanted to, I teach a product design class, and I always dream of making products and having a shop and building a big shop and teaching classes in that shop that are also part of the product. So for people who are older and like maybe this is their second or third career. Because I think that's a whole segment of the population that's a bit neglected in those terms, and they sit behind cubicles, just like wishing their lives away until retirement, and that's no way to live either. But we see a lot of that here, at least in the States. Like, that's most people just like waiting for retirement, and
right. Yeah, I would love to teach. That's one of the reasons why I did my master's. Not only because it gave me those tools to become advanced as a media creator, learning how to do proper lighting and filming and editing and everything else, but also because it gave me the opportunity, if I want to teach down the line. My mother's a college professor in English, so I understand how important teaching is, and it's something people have said since I was 14, said, oh, you'd be so good as a teacher. When are you going to be a history teacher? I said, maybe not history, but like, something. I love history, but like just being able to maybe just work with students. It seems like such a fun exercise, and especially about media now, since media is so changing so rapidly, and the impact it's having, not only in terms of just creation, but also in terms of just society and politics at large. I think it's very important now to have a very media literate society and being able to understand what these tools are, its potential, and the great things they can do, but also understand some of the negative aspects to it as well. So it's something I would love to do in the future. More rewarding
than anything. Like, for instance, yesterday I got a text from my student who just graduated, Alec, and he just found his dream job. He was going to be a film person. Now he found like his maker job. And I was like, oh my gosh. And one of my other favorite students, and not a lot of favorites, but we all favorites, Gianna, she started a podcast in my class about being a diabetic. And that project is now growing strong, and there's a lot of episodes, and it's great, gaining traction. So there's a lot. Being a teacher is like one of the most privileged jobs in the whole world. Yeah. So absolutely. And that's how you learn things, because you have to teach something. Oftentimes, like even like making videos, like sometimes I'm using the videos as an excuse to learn something. Like when I did the laser engrave everything video, I was like, that's my excuse to like literally laser engrave everything I can put my hands on, because I'm teaching it to somebody else. And that's it with this router templates. I never made a router template before this video, like maybe once. And now I've been living in router templates, even though I have a big fancy CNC machine behind me, which is sort of ironic. But that's how you learn a lot of those skills, is when you have to teach it.
Yeah, the classes I TA'd at school, like calculus and engineering economics, I learned them to such a larger degree once I had to teach them. And like, it was a little stressful sometimes, because like our calculus 3 class in our engineering program was like super content heavy. It was so much in that class, and sometimes like you'd be getting ready for a lesson, you'd be like, oh, like I don't have everything down pat for the class. And most of the time I found with teaching, it's like the thing you're most worried about is not the specific nuanced question that the students they're not usually going to ask that one question that you're scared they're going to ask that like you're not super confident on. But it really made me like learn it well. And learning that engineering economics class is really come in handy, as I've had to start dealing with taxes and depreciation and all those other fun things.
I think if you're teaching, as long as you're not wasting people's time, like that's the worst thing you could ever do. Well, not the worst thing you could ever do, but as long as you're not wasting their time and you're adding value,
That's a great way to think about it.
then it's good. You know what I mean? Like as long as you're adding value, for the school I teach at normally, I did the math, and it's about $1 for every minute they're in class. So I just make it worth at least $1, and then they're good. Yeah, $1. You try to make it worth their while, and then it's all good. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole secret. Just don't waste their time. Yeah.
$1 at a time, 1 minute at a time.
Yeah, and be fully present, like 100% present when you're there.
Yeah.
You can always tell the difference between the professors or the teachers who are passionate from the ones maybe not so much passionate.
Yeah. My biggest fear is like I need to leave like the college before I become
a curmudgeon,
like you're describing, when you're not feeling it anymore. Because it's not just you, like Morley, what you were talking about before. If you're not feeling the job anymore, well, you're really only affecting yourself, really. But when you have all these people who might look up to you in some way and you're not feeling it, that's a huge disservice to all those people. So you always need a backup plan in case you feel that way. You hit the ejection button and you're done before you do any damage. Yeah.
All right, cool. So, well, I think we should transition to the next part.
Sounds good.
That was a great conversation.
That was fun.
But we are.
We'll do it again next week.
Yeah. And that segment is what we are putting in the spotlight this week. So since John is our guest, I will let him go first.
I had to think about this like for days, and then I had all these examples and this and that, but really it's just one. It's one, and it's a series. So Wintergatan, are you guys familiar with Wintergatan and the Marble Machine X?
Yes, no. I am.
It is the most important project on the internet right now.
Wait, so real quick, did I notice in one of your videos that you had one of his posters in your shop?
I do. Yeah. That's what I want to do someday. What he is doing, and I cannot wait to see this thing in action. So you need to look at the Marble Machine, the first one, where he basically used a bandsaw and like a cheap like Black & Decker drill to build this magical music machine that uses marbles to make the most amazing music you've ever heard in your life. Well, he decided to redo it, and he took us along for the ride, and it's been a long ride. It's been going on for like a few years now. It feels like I don't even know how many episodes he's in, but he redid everything using digital fabrication tools and collaboration, and he talks about his process. And every time he releases a video, you drop everything. And we have some those creators where you drop everything when as soon as you see that notification. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You pull your car over on the side of the road and watch it. Yeah. Well, he's one of those maker, musicians, artists. He's all those things combined. And so this week he plugged the cable into the back where the musical notes come out of. But the filming's pretty awesome. Like his whole approach to the project is fantastic. So if you have not seen Wintergatan, Marble Machine, especially like the newer series, you just have to do it. Like it's just they're unbelievable.
Yeah, I need to get up to date. I think I saw the first one, but I haven't really since then.
I haven't seen it. Where can you see it?
Just Wintergatan on YouTube, and make sure you're not doing anything else because your mind's gonna be completely blown away. Like that this is even possible. Yeah, it's a great series. I would love to meet the guy someday, but he doesn't live anywhere near.
Looking forward to it.
So he's in Europe.
So my quick tangent, my drop everything and watch what they just come out with creator is Primitive Technology. He's the one guy.
Oh yeah.
Especially since he only comes out with videos every like few months or so. I'm like, he's been working hard on it. Yeah, he's my guy.
That. I know we're not in this topic anymore, but never mind. Next, we'll have to revisit that. Sometimes I wonder, like, do I like videos like Jackman Works, for instance, releases a video only very occasionally, but every single one of them is like internet gold. And then sometimes like the weekly ones, like what you see from creators, sometimes they're not. They're like it's like a Foo Fighters album. I love Foo Fighters, but a lot of the songs are filler songs. Yeah, and then you get like the couple of really awesome ones. Anyways, sorry.
No, it's
yeah, his stuff's great. Yeah, love that.
All right, Ryan, I'll let you go next.
All right, so for what I'm putting into the spotlight this week, it is a YouTube channel called Townsends. So that's Towns and Ends, E-N-D-S. It's one of the most interesting YouTube channels that I've seen in quite a while. So I don't know. Have you guys heard of the YouTube channel Binging with Babish?
No.
No, it's okay. So it's this guy. It's like really, it's like one of these really relaxing cooking videos. So whenever I want to relax, I just watch these like nice, relaxing cooking cooking videos because like they're really well made. They have high production values. So Townsend's is run by
used to
a
be
man
J.F. Townsend's, right?
I think so, but he goes by James Townsend and Son now. So like it's not just a YouTube channel, but it's this whole business that he owns. So he's this historian who owns this little YouTube and business, and is dedicated to exploring the 18th century lifestyle through cooking, building, tools, clothing, music, and so much more. He's based in Indiana, and it's such a great channel because like you see like how they make old recipes from the 18th century. They like examine old tools that they've used, and they like there's a video I think you guys would like where they build a log cabin in the 18th century style with 18th century tools, which I think you guys would enjoy a lot. It's just there's something like it's one of those nice YouTube channels where like the host is so passionate about what he's explaining and what he's doing. It's very Bob Ross-esque in its quality, and that's like high praise because it's very, very relaxing. It has really nice production values, well-filmed videos, nice music. It's if you want videos just to relax you but also learn something, I would recommend this YouTube channel. I really enjoy it a lot.
I think I watched one of his videos before because I was very curious about it's like I was reading like some recipe from Anne of Green Gables that you're like, do people even eat that anymore? And that is what I love about his videos is that like you read about these old timey recipes and he actually shows what they would look and taste like. Like Eden and I are rereading Harry Potter together right now. And maybe this is just like fetishizing British culture, but you're like, that doesn't even sound like real food. And I love that he does that he like,
Oh, it's very cool. And not only that, but he's also dressed up in 18th century clothing because they make and sell 18th century clothing. Like they've sold their clothing to like movies like Pirates of the Caribbean and for all different types of museums and other historical recreations. So, and like it's so interesting. He's dressed up in this clothing and he's explaining all of this to you as he's hosting the video. It's really great. It's one of the most authentic and enjoyable YouTube channels. And yeah, go check it out.
That's awesome. Really cool. I will.
Sure. Yeah, I need to watch more of his videos because I think that's a rabbit hole I could really fall down. All right.
You're warned.
My spotlight for this week, I want to put on a podcast series by 99% Invisible, which I know a lot of people know. But this series within 99% Invisible is called Articles of Interest. So it's hosted by Avery Trufelman. And if you're a real podcast fiend, you might also know her from Nice Try, which is a podcast series about utopian attempts, which is pretty interesting as well. But this series... it's all about clothing and things we wear and why we wear them and their history. So I think there's about 12 episodes. They've one about wedding dresses, wedding rings, plaid. I just listened to today. They're really, really cool. And like, the denim one was super interesting. It's a lot of things you take for granted and you never really think about how recent of an invention this clothing item might have been and all the social things surrounding it. She had a really interesting one about pockets and why women's pockets are so small compared to men's pockets. It's really, really well done. I would definitely recommend, and it's cool. It makes me want to get some like really nice denim jeans. And it's interesting as well because she's someone who clearly loves fashion and has to kind of be a little uncomfortable confronting some of the negative aspects of fashion. They had a really interesting one about like knockoffs and Dapper Dan and how that all started and how the story might not be exactly what you expect, how this kind of designers or people stealing designs, there's kind of two sides to that. And there's also large companies like Zara stealing the designs of small designers. Very, very interesting. Would recommend.
That's cool. That's good.
And if it's buying 99% Invisible, it's gonna be high production quality.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, guys? That was a great conversation.
No, thanks.
That was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. This was amazing. I feel like I've learned so much tonight just from this conversation alone, and I hope we have another episode with you in the future because this is a lot of fun.
Same time, same place next week.
For sure. We'll have beers this time.
No, that's I love what you guys are doing. So I look forward to hearing all the other episodes and just keep doing this. This is great.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John.
This is fun.
Thanks so much.
All righty.
Take care, guys.
Have a good rest of your night.
You too. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.